We are ready. Recording's going.
Thank you. I hereby open the regular session of the Planning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Landon
Present.
and Vice Chair Salazar has been excused. So we have Commissioner Cuevila,
Here.
Commissioner Gill,
Present.
Commissioner Bergen,
Here.
Commissioner McGinley,
Present.
and Commissioner Buck.
Present.
Thank you. I will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, we have some approval meeting minutes that need to be approved. Sandy, do we do those one at a time or can we do those collectively?
You can do them individually or collectively. It's at the discretion of the commission.
All right. Are there any corrections to the minutes or do we have a motion to approve the minutes as published in the agenda packet?
I move to approve the minutes in the agenda packet.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We now have business from the audience. We'll now take business from the audience. As a reminder, this is a time to speak on any topic that is not otherwise on the agenda tonight. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or press *9 if joining by phone. Please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. When called upon to speak, please state your name and mailing address. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. At this time, I am not seeing any hands raised. So we'll call for an agenda item for the development code update. Tonight, the Springfield Planning Commission is deliberating on the city-initiated amendments to the Springfield Development Code affecting residential and employment lands in Springfield. A joint public hearing with Lane County Planning Commission was held on January 4th, and the record was left open for additional public comments through January 18th. Any comments submitted after 10 a.m. on January 18th will be provided to the City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners for their public hearing later in the spring. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the Springfield Planning Commission to complete deliberations regarding whether to approve with modifications, or not approve the development code updates. But before we begin our deliberations, we need to declare any potential conflicts of interest. Turn the time over to our city attorney.
Thank you, Chair. Conflicts of interest must be declared once per meeting on the same topic. Commissioners may only have a potential conflict of interest regarding the code update project because the Commission's future recommendation to the City Council isn't binding. Commissioners with potential conflicts of interest must disclose the nature of the conflict and then can participate in the regular session. One example of a potential conflict of interest related to the Development Code Update project is owning residential or commercial land in Springfield because property values may be affected by the proposed code changes. Chair, you may now roll call planning commissioners to ask them to declare potential conflicts of interest.
Thank you.
Commissioner Landon, do you have a potential conflict of interest?
I have a potential conflict of interest in that I own property in Springfield.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar is not here. Commissioner Quavala,
Exactly the same as Commissioner Lamb.
thank you. Commissioner Gill,
I also own property in Springfield, so have a potential conflict of interest.
thank you. Commissioner Bergen,
Potential conflict of interest being a property owner in Springfield, as well as a practicing real estate broker in the area.
Commissioner McGinley,
I do not own land. I have no potential conflict of interest.
and Commissioner Buck.
Two potential conflicts. One, I am a property owner in Springfield, and I am an insurance agent in the area as well.
Thank you.
We will turn the time now over to Mark Rust for his presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and provide a brief introduction here to the topic tonight for the continued deliberations on the Development Code Update project. You've seen a lot of these slides before. I'd like to share them each time at the beginning for any of the viewing public or if somebody's watching the meeting later. As I've gone over and has been approved as part of the community engagement plan for this project that was approved by this body acting in their capacity as the Committee for Citizen Involvement. This is the general overall purpose of the Development Code Update project. I'm not going to read it, but there it is. And the objectives also contained in that same community engagement plan are listed here, as they're listed in that plan as well. Overall, the Development Code Update project is directed by the City Council to look at how to update and streamline our development code. These are the approval criteria for consideration as part of tonight's deliberations and that are considered in the findings as part of the public hearing for the adoption process. And then this is the overview of the timeline of the larger project. The phase 1, represented by these yellow bars in the timeline, is under consideration tonight, as well as phase 2, represented by these orange bars. The red line indicates here where we're concurrently considering phase 1 and phase 2 together. We are now within this formal adoption process as part of the Planning Commissioner's public hearing. So with that, to recap the previous deliberations, both jointly, partially with the Lane County Planning Commission and individually just the Springfield Planning Commission, a number of topics have been discussed and straw polls on these topics have been taken. And so these include the lot coverage versus the impervious surface coverage topic, the discussion on different definitions changes. There was discussion on the urbanizable fringe overlay changes, including ADUs and duplexes being allowed in that urbanizable fringe overlay. That's specific to including the interest of the Lane County Planning Commission for the areas of the urban growth boundary that are outside the city limits. Also, the topics of lot size and parking were discussed at the last deliberation session. So with that, and based on the previous packets of materials, staff has identified these 3 primary remaining issues to continue to discuss, deliberate on tonight. I have some information prepared on these 3 topics to provide for consideration of the Planning Commission to lead the deliberations if that's appropriate. There are some, as included in the packet of materials tonight. I will just reference the entire packet at this point does include the entire draft development code sections. It also includes some additional exhibits, including the staff report, which includes the legal findings. It also includes the order and recommendation that staff is asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on tonight, as well as the briefing memo. There's also a draft of a potential supplemental recommendation included as attachment 3 in the packet. as well as attachment 4, which includes 4 position papers provided by Commissioner Quavila that we can also discuss tonight. Also outlined in that packet, in addition to these 3 topics, there are some additional minor changes, for the most part minor, that we're asking for the Planning Commission to consider tonight. Mainly these first 2 specifically are typos for the most part. Number 3, and again, I'll provide some more information on these specifically in just a little bit, but number 3 is a little more substantive in that it's removing a prohibition on a certain use as a home business because we're preempted by state law. And the 4th one is a potential revision to consider to the definitions of dwelling unit and kitchen that I'll talk about in a little more detail. But overall tonight, the recommendation from staff is asking the Planning Commission to adopt a final order and recommendation that's included as attachment 2. There are some potential options for you to consider as part of that we can talk through, and any other changes that you would like incorporated. Additionally, you may want to consider if you want to forward a supplemental recommendation to the City Council separate from the formal recommendation. There are some anticipated topics that we've included as part of that could also go forward. I do want to note it's possible to finalize the deliberations and recommendation on the order and recommendation for the development code tonight, but continue deliberations and discussion about the supplemental recommendation at a later date. Because we have to formally move the code update recommendation forward through a joint public hearing process with both the City Council and the Board of Lane County Commissioners, that process needs to take place on that formal recommendation after we take it back to the Lane County Planning Commission to seek their formal recommendation on it to the Board of County Commissioners as well. However, the supplemental recommendation could, like I said, be continued to be discussed and then forwarded on in still a parallel timeline, but it doesn't have to go through the same formal process. It could still go to the City Council on a similar time frame or at the same time. So with that, I'm happy to jump into a discussion about the first of the 3 remaining topics that we've outlined, and that is discouraging demolition of structures. You heard about this topic a little bit at the public hearing. There was some testimony about it and some discussion by the Planning Commission already in deliberations about it. So we've identified 2 potential options for this. The first option here that you see on the screen is retaining the existing language. To address some of the concerns, we've also provided an alternative option of clarifying some of the language to make it more explicit in regard to trying to preserve existing structures. There's some discussion in the packet memo for tonight about the impacts to the historic district specifically, and we feel that the current language addressing demolition of structures in the historic district is pretty clear. But if there's questions about that, we haven't incorporated that into any options at this point. But a third potential option could be the Planning Commission specifying other changes and incorporating that as a different option. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back to the chair and the commission to have you discuss this topic if you'd like.
Okay, at this time, we'll entertain any comments, questions from the commission.
I can stop sharing my screen if it'd be easier to identify people with their hands up. I do see Commissioner Bergen's hand.
Thank you. I could not see that. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. On this, I think, so one of the things that first comes to mind is rather than, and it might just be, I hope I'm not wordsmithing, but rather than discouraging demolition, I would like to see encouraging retention or encouraging and versus discouraging. So maybe that looks like incentivizing, like we've talked about. And I know that that seems to be our phrase, our word that we've been using on a lot of these. But instead of using the word discouraging, to maybe SDC fees are waived at a better rate if you maintain the existing structure, instead of saying you can't, you're exempt from specific things if you do or don't, I don't want to say comply, but do what the code allows for, so that we can encourage that. Sometimes it just isn't the best option, the highest and best use for that piece of land. And so I think that if we were to flip that and be more positive and proactive and encourage that with specific, if you do this, then you get this. And so that's just my quick gut reaction.
Thank you. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. My qualm with option 2 is creating some non-conforming uses. I think whenever we can, it's important to have as many conforming uses result from our code as possible. I do think that some of the existing code does discourage the demolition of existing houses or encourage the addition of housing units on existing lots. So one of the provisions that I think really does that is allowing detached dwellings or detached duplexes. And we've seen that be really successful in other places. And then I think the other provision in House Bill 2001 that allows for the conversion, the internal conversion, which would just be a building code process, also does. So I appreciate the willingness to call it out. And I think that by exempting new construction on existing lots from those standards makes me a little uncomfortable with the non-conforming uses. Thank you.
Okay. Other comment? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I definitely agree with the sentiments from Commissioner McGinley and Mrs. Bergen. I also think, there is a time when it's appropriate for demolition to happen. I mean, some structures do need to be taken down, and it makes it very difficult to salvage portions of them. And so I want to make sure that whatever we put in there allows for that possibility, that people aren't penalized, so to speak, for saying, you know what, we really can't salvage this. It's not a matter of aesthetic choice. It's a matter of really we're at a place where it's just not the best practice for what's going on here. And so I want to make sure that those decisions around that's an option for people. And again, it's not based on aesthetics or those kind of things, but more on just what makes sense in terms of safety and in terms of just the used in all of those things. So I just want to make sure people aren't penalized for doing what makes sense when it does.
Thank you. Any other comment?
And I'll just chime in if I may, Chair, that it may be
Please.
helpful and I don't know if Christina at some point wants to specify the specific difference between the two options of the existing language versus the proposed language. We're not, and just in terms of Commissioner Bergen's comments, we're not proposing to use the words discourage or encourage, but really it's a pretty minor language change that we are proposing. And I can just share my screen one more time here really quick. But also at the same time, I think Commissioner McGinley raises a valid point for consideration of being sensitive around creating non-conforming uses. But really it's, so the existing language is this here. And so I'll just use this first one, duplex conversion as the example. It's the shortest, but additions to or conversion of an existing single unit detached dwelling to a duplex is allowed, versus the option 2 language just adds of it's really minor wordsmithing really, but to just clarify, it does provide a little more clarity. It talks about attached or detached additions. So detached additions to or internal conversion of an existing single unit. So really that's the extent really of the language change, is just being more clear that what this is saying is if somebody wants to add a detached addition, meaning a second dwelling to be considered a duplex, that's exempt also from those middle housing standards when a site's redeveloped. So that is kind of the extent of encouraging keeping that existing dwelling while they can recognize adding additional development on the site. Does that sound right, Christina, how I explained that?
That's correct. And then the changes, similar changes to the triplex and fourplex provisions would make it match more closely what is available for cottage clusters, where a property can develop a cottage cluster, cottage housing development by keeping an existing dwelling on the lot and then adding additional cottages. This would extend that for a similar type of development for triplexes and fourplexes. It previously wasn't clear in the code that you would not have to make conversions or changes to the existing single family home if you wanted to incorporate it into a detached duplex, triplex, or quadplex. It could have been interpreted to require conforming changes with those standards to occur to that main structure, which I think would tend to discourage retention of those structures. And I can appreciate the comment around framing, and that may come into play with the supplemental recommendation when you get to that later, even though those words are not used in these options.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments? Commissioner McGinley.
Commissioner Gill's hand was up before mine. It's hiding in her
All
yellow
right,
wall.
you're right. It's hiding up there in the corner. Thank you, Commissioner Gill.
Thank you. I appreciate what Commissioner Bergen said about the framing of this. I think that is very important. And I, in my work, I see a lot of demolition occur, and a lot of demolition occurs to buildings that don't need to be demolished, and that alternative solutions are not, the time is not taken to look for alternatives. And I think that while we have to address the requirements of state law and this housing, and we are also trying to achieve what the council directed to staff regarding making a clearer, easier to use, remove barriers kind of development code. I think that there are important things for our community, like sustainability and environmental responsibility. And demolition is very detrimental to the environment and not very sustainable to resources. And so I think it is really important to do as much as we can to encourage the use of existing properties to help achieve these housing goals. And I think it can be done in a strong way. I lean toward option 2 in this, but I would also like to see some or I support the supplemental recommendations where we can talk further and encourage the council to consider even more possibilities for benefits for retention of properties.
Thank you, Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Gill. I'm just toying around with this, doing a lot of external processing, I guess, live with you all. So for option 2 with duplexes, I think I'm okay with that because duplexes are generally subject to the same standards as single detached dwellings in the same zone. And so I don't really see how there would be increased non-conformance. For all of the others, I'm struggling because if someone had a modest dwelling on a 5,000 square foot lot and wanted to add 2 more dwellings, it would be non-conforming with the proposed, triplex requirements as they currently stand. We opted to go for larger lot sizes, the most amount of parking that we could require, the design standards. And it's the planner in me is like, go away, but run away from the non-conforming uses. And I like the idea of incentivizing, saying that you can have a smaller lot size, that you can have less parking if you preserve the existing structure. So I think it does encourage that type of development where it is truly backyard infill. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to support option 2 because I do think that it is that extra incentive. And it accomplishes some of what I was advocating for earlier for smaller lot sizes, resulting in smaller dwellings that will be lower cost. So yeah, I'll stand there. Thank you for changing my mind, Commissioner Gill. That's always a fun thing to have happen.
Indeed. Commissioner Cuevila.
Would say I agree with the sentiments of Commissioner Gill. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion?
And I'll just chime in, Chair. I don't know that we necessarily need a motion at this point. We'll be looking for kind of the overall motion for the order overall for the code moving forward. We've handled some of these topics previously as kind of a straw poll. I don't know if you want to do a more formal straw poll than what we just heard from a handful of the commissioners. We could go around and kind of do head nods if option 2 is the direction, or we could just proceed with a couple of the other topics, given what sounds like roughly, what am I counting? 1, 2, 3, potentially Commissioner Buck as a 4th of number of the commissioners kind of leaning towards option 2 at this point, but incorporate option 2 into the overall motion in a little bit if that's appropriate and see if there's actual support from a vote, or do a more formal straw poll now.
I wouldn't mind doing a straw poll now. Those that would tend to favor including option 2. I'm seeing unanimous.
Up there too. Yeah.
Commissioner Bergen chimed
Commissioner
in. Was
Bergen,
that-
I can't see. So Commissioner, she has a hand up. So good.
Yeah, I won't have my video on tonight. I shared that with staff already.
Okay. Thank you for chiming in. I definitely appreciate that. So it looks like folks like option 2.
Great.
So
I'll move on then to the next topic for your consideration. I'll share my screen again here. The next topic is access to green space. So this topic came up in previous deliberations. We discussed this also in the packet memo tonight. Overall, I think the commission could consider a recommendation to the city council to examine code changes or other programs to incentivize access to green space outside the development code update project. At this point, staff feels it's outside the scope, and we provide some information on the extent that the Willamette Lane Parks and Recreation District does take the lead in our city for access to open space, but wanted to provide space here in the meeting tonight to discuss this. So.
I'm a little, Mark, what, can you make a recommendation on the best way to proceed on this? Just look for comment?
I see a number of hands. Again, I'll stop sharing my screen, but.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That actually helps me a great deal. I don't know who is first, so I'm just going to go left to right if that's okay. So Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. So I guess, and you can kind of listen to all of our comments and get to mine at the end. You don't have to respond to one by one, Mark. But I guess I don't understand. I guess I'm not quite sure why we're thinking it would be outside the scope of the land use code to include green space. To me, I'm confused as to why that would be. I would think that would fall within the code structure, but I'm sure there's a lot that I'm not understanding. So just putting that out there.
And if I could just potentially quickly clarify, if I said outside the scope of the development code in general, I didn't mean that. What our recommendation is that it's outside the scope of this development code update project. So within the scope of the updates that we're doing right now, that considering this kind of structure is beyond the scope of what was originally contemplated for this code update project, but that it could be considered in more detail later. But I agree, it is within the realm potentially, depending on how it's structured, to consider some of these changes as part of the development code.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm supportive of including, a letter to council along with our recommendation that urges them to explore access to green space planning along with Willamette Lane. I do think it's important, and if there are no specific development code standards and criteria that apply within a certain distance from green space, then I do think it's outside the scope of this particular project. And it's something that we've heard come up. And so I want to be able to respect that and put something in motion or start something to come down the pipeline for us.
Separately, okay. Commissioner Cuevila?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Commissioner Buck in that I believe that this is totally within our charge to investigate this. The code is full of instances of green space requirements, even to, how many trees are planted or what the percentage of green space on a piece of property is. And I think my initial discussions of green space did not relate to access to green space off of properties. Rather, it was my initial discussion regarding green space was preservation of green space on properties that were to be developed, and also requirements for green space or incentives for green space on the properties themselves. So I believe involving Willamette Lane is, I think that would be very problematic. So what I would just as soon have this constrained by is discussions of green space on properties to be developed or redeveloped. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Chair Landon, I have comments.
Please.
So I agree. Where this came up for me in all of our conversations was in the conversations about lot coverage and what, what can, how much the lot can be covered, and thus there is less green space on the lot. So we might be losing that green space, whatever it looks like on everybody's individual properties. And I think that that is an important conversation to have. There is a fine balance between quality of life and housing is a super high priority and maybe should be considered higher than quality of life. But I think everybody should have a good quality of life wherever they get to have their housing. I also think it impacts the community as a whole. And so I think it is an important conversation to have with this. From my perspective, the city council was already wanting to expand ease of development. So I think this will lie within their direction, what is being proposed, but I would encourage them to look at things like incentives for maintaining some level of green space on the properties, or maybe if they're having more dense housing in area where they don't need to do as much green space, if they're next to lots of public green space is an option. I just think it's a really important conversation to have. I feel similarly about the solar access situation, and already City Council had directed that should be removed. So I still think it's important to bring up. I do believe it's in our purview, as Commissioner Cuevila and Buck mentioned already. That said, I think the code language is doing what it said it would. So I would like to see this proposed in the supplemental encouragement to look at incentivizing green space in a healthy way for all the people in the community.
A tough balancing act. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. So now that we've established that we were talking about open space, so I tend to think green space is publicly owned land managed by Willamette Lane when it comes to Springfield. I wanted to check in with the commission to see if there were any setbacks or any other standards that you felt were inadequate for open space. And so right now it's a 10-foot front and rear yard setback, 5-foot side yard setback. And then the lot coverage standards are on a spectrum depending on lot size. We did a straw poll with lot coverage, but just wanted to check in and see how everyone's feeling about that.
Thoughts? Input from the commission. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Originally, I think that my thought process was a little different than what Commissioner Cuevila articulated, but I really do agree with what he's saying in terms of, existing lots that have the ability to preserve green space. I think is important, and having, I believe you cited 10 feet front and back, 5 feet side to side is currently what's protected. you know, to me, I think that's fine as a minimum, but I also don't think I would love to see more green space protected when and where available, if there's a way to do that. Because like I said, 10 feet doesn't really give much space. But those are that's my 2 cents on it. That having been said, I mean, I understand there's only so much we can do.
Mark?
Yeah, Chair, if I could just offer a comment, just, I know we've talked about this before, but just in terms of kind of a reminder, because it's fresh on my mind as well, as the city will now be operating on under a new stormwater permit requirement. We're still figuring out how to implement that new stormwater permit, but I think we have about a year and a half to fully implement it. We're already starting to meet and discuss what it will require, but essentially for every new single family home or middle housing, it will require the retention and treatment of stormwater on site. So similar to how Eugene has been required to process or deal with stormwater on site for years, we'll now be in a similar situation where every lot will essentially have some kind of stormwater facility or swale retention type vegetated facility on the site to provide for that stormwater treatment and I guess dissipation. So anyway, just wanted to mention that even though we're keeping the setbacks and lot coverage essentially the same from the existing code, in the new code, it's likely that once we do fully implement these new stormwater standards, those may not be able to even be fully realized due to the implementation of the new stormwater requirements, or there will be now requirements to have vegetated areas for stormwater treatment. So just wanted to mention that topic.
Commissioner McGinley.
I apologize for talking so much. Mark, do you mind walking us through what, if any, tree preservation standards currently apply to dwellings in the R1 zone?
And Commissioner McKinley, thanks for that question. To reiterate, make sure I heard you correctly, it was your question is about tree preservation?
Yes, if there are any tree preservation standards in the R1 zone. Or sorry, right now it would be the low density residential
Right.
zone, but it's proposed to be the R1 zone.
So for an individual lot, and I want to make sure I get the number correct. We require a tree felling permit for 5 or more trees to be removed from an individual lot. And I can't remember if the trigger is at 5 or more than 5, but so somebody could, and we don't inventory the trees in terms of if it has to be over a certain DBH. I think I want to say it's 8-inch DBH or above. So if there's trees smaller than that, it doesn't count towards that 5. I could look up our tree preservation code section while we're going here and just make sure I'm getting those numbers right. It's at my fingertips here. It'll just take me a second.
I got it if you want me to chime in, Mark.
That'd be great. Thank you, Christina.
5 trees, 5 DBH, 5 diameters at breast height.
Right.
And it would be more than 5. So you
More
can
than
do
5.
up to 5 in 12 consecutive months on property of common ownership. So if you have done a subdivision and not sold off lots yet, it would apply to sort of contiguous commonly owned properties. So you don't get 5. You don't necessarily get 5 per lot, but you could. It would have a different context for sort of greenfield development versus infill development.
And I will just mention too, commissioners, that for instance, if we're talking about something beyond, say, single unit dwellings or middle housing, if it falls into the realm of site plan review, there's criteria under site plan review currently, and I'd have to double check the draft code, but for I'm not sure if the word is preservation, but there's some contemplation of existing areas of significant vegetation, at least is what the term is used in the existing code. So again, I'd have to double check that in the draft code. But if it falls into the realm of, say, a multifamily or multi-unit development beyond middle housing that would go through site plan approval, then it might be slightly different. Anyway.
Thank you. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
Am I correct in understanding that if we change the, or whatever tree preservation standards apply to single detached dwellings in a zone will also apply to middle housing in the same zone? There can't be more restrictive tree preservation standards for middle housing in the same zone. So that, if I'm correct in that line of thinking, then just wanted to get a feel for the commission, is 5 the right number when we're looking for that trigger for the tree felling permit as we're working through the development code update project? I think that's one of the things we could consider if we're looking to preserve existing natural resources on privately owned green space.
Other comments or questions? I'll confess, having lived in Chicago, I'm a little bit concerned about getting too close, getting to the tree line, if you will, getting too close to the sidewalk, and you end up with precious little. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the order recommending approval, or with modifications, changes, anything like any of that?
Chair, there was just an additional, or I just think I saw another hand go up. Maybe that was my own.
That was
Just
your own.
one additional topic of the 3, and then wanted to just make sure that there's a consideration by the commission of the other minor changes. If I could just go through a couple of the last things here.
Please do.
Before there's a call for the motion. So again, I'll share my screen here. So the third topic of the 3 that I wanted to make sure were covered tonight was a topic around incentivization for home ownership. Again, this is a topic that is a pretty big topic in terms of how it may be handled. There may be elements that could be considered as part of the code update project, but it is definitely is one of those topics that is a lot more multifaceted than just the development code standards. The one thing I'll say is that we have worked through the implementation at the state level for middle housing to advocate for home ownership. It's part of the city council's housing strategy is to encourage home ownership. One of the things we lobbied for early on in the development of House Bill 2001 was to include the townhome option within middle housing, because that was prior to townhomes being included as a middle housing type. The other type, none of the other types were effectively would allow a single unit dwelling to be owner occupied, or I guess should say owned individually. And so, but now with the implementation of Senate Bill 458, that changes that whole dynamic. But anyway, needless to say, also providing the flexibility in the code through middle housing to allow detached units, as has been discussed. So anyway, we don't have a recommendation here. We think a lot of the work around this topic will be implemented with the subsequent House Bill 2003 work that will be coming. But again, just wanted to provide space. This topic had come up previously in deliberations to want to make sure and cover it. So if there's any further discussion about this topic.
Okay, you may want to maybe reduce that so I can see hands. Commissioner Gill.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a code recommendation for this, but I think it is really important. So in that supplemental recommendations, I would be happy to see this go forward, and maybe if council is leaning that way anyway, it would be supporting their leanings. But and I think as a whole package in that supplemental recommendation, like, let's really look at housing. Like, we were pushed into it a little bit. But I think the possibilities for incentivizing a lot of things are really real. And that means that our development can be really purposeful and meaningful in this community. And I think that's an important thing to do. And so I would encourage strong language in that supplemental document to really dig into really well-rounded, meaningful housing planning beyond what's in the development code. It's critical, and we need to do it right. It's been done lots of ways, and we've seen lots of ways, and some have great intentions and have accidental negative fallout. So I just think a lot of conversation and care and real planning is important for us at this time.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I do want to echo what Commissioner Gill had mentioned about the importance of this. And I think House Bill 2001 had great intentions, and I think 458 is really rounding that out. It's one thing to promote the ability to have doors in a community. It's another to promote the ability for homeownership. We talk about inequities quite often, and the gaps and the ability to pass generational wealth. And this is a really great opportunity for us to have a hand in that, to allow middle housing to develop, and whether it's incentives or pieces to the code, or gosh, I don't know what it is. I will tell you that there are communities across the country that are the real estate industry. We're talking about how to make homeownership more attainable. We're at the Oregon Realtors are working really hard at the state level to make sure that our own community members within the state are able to afford homeownership to where it's attainable for them as well. And I think that by us as at the city level, having, as Commissioner Gill had said, a really intentional conversation about not having the conversation to have it, but to actually have the conversation to have progress and something that will benefit our community members. Because in my opinion, having doors is fantastic and we need it. And we have such a shortage of doors in the community. But when you establish an opportunity for someone to step into homeownership, those are the people that are more likely to stay in our community. Not to say that renters don't stay in our community, but when you allow an opportunity for buy-in, I think that that really helps the quality of life that Commissioner Gill was speaking to earlier in a different topic. And this is of utmost importance. And I don't think that a rush decision is the appropriate way. There's a lot of conversation from some really intelligent people on how to fix this. And it's right up there next to world peace. So I think that I appreciate that we're opening this opportunity for conversation of how we can implement this into code for this problem, because it's not going away.
Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this work is so personal to everyone because we all live here in this community. I'm the only renter on the commission. I'm 26. I have no college loans, really fortunate there. I make above the median income and I cannot buy a house. I cannot. There's nothing in my price range. And it's horrifying. There's just nothing for me to buy. There's no way for me to own property without inheriting wealth. And it's a crisis. It's something that prevents young professionals like myself from staying in the community. I have no idea how people who make less than the median income can purchase property. If people making 100, 200, 300% of area median income can't purchase a house, there's a problem. And so I'm well aware of that. And I'm so proud to be a part of this commission and this recommendation, because there are components of this recommendation that do create more options of housing types of all shapes and sizes in all areas of our city for people like me to buy a home. So I think with the smaller lot sizes for single detached dwellings and duplexes, the increased lot coverage, Senate Bill 458 coming in with the middle housing land divisions, with us allowing detached dwellings. It gets me so excited for the possibilities. So I know that we can get lost in the technical aspects of this. And truly, I appreciate what Commissioner Bergen just said and what Commissioner Gill said. Like, this is just of utmost importance. And so just wanted to take a moment for gratitude as we're nearing the end of this project, and we might see some really exciting change start come July 1st when the code is due. So just really proud. And yeah, I stand by all of the stuff that's in the code already to incentivize homeownership.
If it's not inappropriate, I appreciate that perspective. I sometimes forget I'm a little older, and so, I have my house, and so I appreciate that reminder. Any other discussion, questions, comments? Mark?
Yeah, and so I didn't hear any specific direction other than we can kind of transition, I think, here in maybe a little bit to the discussion of the supplemental recommendation. I did want to make sure and cover the minor changes, just to highlight really quick, to make sure these are considered as part of the package for tonight. They're, again, pretty minor. I could reference the page numbers if commissioners would like for the PDF page number in the packet tonight, or others, but these are almost typos, but this, so this number 2 on here, we're fixing a reference. The 3.2D is similar to the reference here in this, the code section just before it. There were just adding this figure reference in this code section and then changing the D from what is currently a C, which is an incorrect or a typo. So just wanted to highlight those minor typographical changes. I did mention this deletion as a home business of a gun dealer. This came to light very recently because we actually occasionally we get calls from the ATF, the federal agency that regulates alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. When anybody applies for a federal firearm license, the ATF researches that, and they usually call us as the local jurisdiction to confirm zoning and if the use they're proposing is allowed in the zone at the facility. In this case, it was a member of the public wanting to have a home business doing, I think it was like custom engraving, which is considered gunsmithing, which requires approval by the ATF. Anyway, it came to light through that recent phone call with the ATF and conversations with the assistant city attorney and such, that we do have this existing prohibition in our existing code, and we carried it over into the draft code. But I provide the Oregon revised statutes reference here. We are preempted by state law from prohibiting that as a use. So we're proposing to delete that now as a minor change to what was included previously. And then lastly, this is a topic that gets into a bit more detail. So I'm happy to expand on it, but this is I would say in the regard of trying to simplify and make our code easier to use and being more consistent. But so this is on the slide here, the first definition of dwelling unit. This was basically taken directly out of the building code. And so our building, the Oregon building code, which I think is adopted from the International Building Code, and then we locally adopt it, is, I don't want to say exactly verbatim, because I think there was a minor change because we're using the framing of single unit rather than single family. I can't remember exactly, but this whole language about including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. And we've run into this recently because the question comes up is, what does a permanent provision for eating mean? Or what does a permanent provision for cooking mean exactly? So in terms of clarity, we had already proposed to include a new definition in the code for kitchen. So now what we're wanting to do is just rely on that new definition for kitchen in this definition. So instead of saying including permanent provisions for eating and cooking, we're saying that the dwelling would include a kitchen and then permanent provisions for living, sleeping, and sanitation. And then to follow on that, the definition of kitchen would be to slightly modify it, and that this stems back a little bit to some of the conversation that was had with the joint deliberations that happened with the Lane County Planning Commission. There was some discussion about concerns about, I think one of the Lane County Planning Commissioners concerned about like an outdoor barbecue area or outdoor kitchen or his fish cleaning station and things like that. Other people have hobby rooms or garages with utility sinks, this kind of stuff. So we're proposing to add these three words, of saying three or more of the following. So it wouldn't just be including any one. If prior to adding these three words of three or more, it would be any one of the following: a sink or electric outlet. The concern again being that if somebody had say a hobby room that they want to do pottery in, and they had a utility sink and a gas outlet for a kiln or something like that, that would now automatically be considered a kitchen or something like that. So anyway, if there's discussion or questions about any of this, I'm happy to go into that, but just wanted to provide that as additional changes that we've proposed to have be considered as part of the commission's recommendation tonight.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think those make sense. They make sense to me. I don't know if this is the appropriate time. I've actually kind of struggled with finding the appropriate time. And at this point, it just might be a point of just stating it out there. With the low density, medium density, and high density changing to R1, R2, R3, I find a little bit of concern with that specifically. Honestly, it's probably one of the lowest things that we've even talked about. The only concern I have is in the industry, anything that has, as far as zoning goes, that a number follows the letter, that's an acreage minimum. And so when I've talked with a couple of other people about this within the industry, their eyes get so big and just say, that seems like it would be such a point of confusion for not only professionals, real estate professionals, but also our clients that we're training them what these zone codes mean. So like for those that aren't aware, RR5 is rural residential 5-acre minimum. RR25, rural residential 25-acre minimum. So when they see the R1, then even though we don't intend for it to be 1-acre minimum, that's what we have all come to understand. So when we see residential 1-acre minimum, residential 2-acre minimum, residential 3-acre minimum, even though that's not the intent, that's just one concern that I've had throughout since we were introduced to that new verbiage. And it might really be not a big deal, but it's been something that's been weighing on me and trying to find the right place to put this in.
Mark?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a valid comment for sure. Having worked in Lane County for 7 years prior to my employment with City of Springfield, you're correct. And even when you go beyond the rural residential zones, there's the EFU, the exclusive farm zone, and forest zones that have those same numbers, acreage minimums. I would say it's probably just from a kind of a land use planner perspective, there's some difference between rural county zoning and how they deal with it versus urban city type zoning. I'd be curious if Commissioner McGinley could weigh in on how City of Eugene zones are designated. I think they're similar to the R1, R2, R3, but I can't recall for sure. But I'll know in going through the rulemaking process, a lot of city jurisdictions, and my specific recollection is my days back with the City of Bend when I worked over there, but also with a lot of the Portland metro cities, the number often indicates how many dwellings per acre can be developed. So I know I want to say it's Hillsborough, but I don't want to misquote, so I'm not positive, but they have like a R 7.5 and a R10. And so those are 7.5 dwellings per acre or 10 dwellings per acre. And then it goes up from there. So again, there's different jurisdictions use it in different ways. And that's just what I wanted to say. So thanks.
Commissioner McGinley.
Yeah,
were you-
so I can just answer Mark's question. It's okay. Sorry, I had my video off. I was eating. So yeah, Eugene does mirror Springfield's proposed approach with having R1 as the lower density neighborhood residential, and then moves up to R2, R3, and R4. However, I do think Commissioner Bergen brings up a good point. And so I think that's something we could consider is, does it make sense to align with our neighbor? I don't know if there's a specific approach that the Eugene Springfield realtors use, or if it would be easier for them or more difficult if Eugene has different standards in R1, R2, R3, and R4 as Springfield would have in those same zones. And I'm curious to know what other jurisdictions in Oregon use, for consistency. So yeah, I also think maybe using density could be a little problematic because some middle housing is not subject to maximum density. So I'm not sure what we would use, but I think we should consider the right names.
Mark?
Yeah, and if I could just agree with Commissioner McKinley about the reason to begin with that we were going away from the words density for low density, medium density is due to the middle housing, and that essentially primarily for low density, we're no longer able to regulate by density. We do have to allow, specifically cottage cluster is one of the middle housing types that doesn't have any maximum density limitation. So we can't even really put a number to it. So we felt that describing our zones based on a density then was artificial at that point. I think staff would be open to different labels for the different zones if they made sense in a different way. It's a fairly easy change. It's just nomenclature really. So, but anyway, I'm open to suggestions.
Commissioner McGinley? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I could request before our next meeting, our next joint meeting with the Lane County Planning Commission for staff to come back perhaps with some options. I think you could also just send out a request to the Oregon Planners Network email listserv and just see what other people have to say about it. Because I'm sure that this quandary has come up with removing density from specific zones. So yeah, I think if we could have like a buffet of options to choose from, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. I guess I would hope that we could move a recommendation forward and then barring any potential last minute change to nomenclature for the zones, but obviously at the commission's discretion. So, but yeah, I can definitely provide some research on the topic.
Commissioner Gill?
Yeah, I think it would be, thank you. I think it's a useful conversation to have, and I think we could have a recommendation today, but maybe encourage staff and city council to keep having that conversation because there's a decision from city council later. So in the in-between, I agree. I'm open to looking at solutions. And if it remains the R1, 2, 3, because we've done the work to look at it a little more deeply, then that's great. But I also think that kind of decision the council can take action on, if that makes sense and is appropriate. It seems like that can be okay.
Good, good. Other comments, questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
I've put in the chat sample motion language based on the cumulative deliberations you've had to date.
Okay, Christina, does everybody have access to that?
It's in the chat window, so there's an example there, and everyone should have access to the chat window.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. I move to adopt the order in attachment 2 with the changes to 3.2.245 and 3.2.255 as provided in attachment 1, option 1.2.
Okay, we'll roll call the votes. Commissioner Landon, aye. Commissioner Salazar.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just interject, we would
My
be looking for a second to the motion
Oh,
and
so-
then any
Thank you, you are
discussion.
correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Second to the motion and or discussion.
Could we discuss what exactly the motion entails? It's so far to me, it just seems,
I would,
please.
I'd be happy to put the order up on the screen for consideration.
I think
If you
that
can
works.
just give me a second here to get to that.
Chair, forgive me for the interjection, but we still have not seconded the motion, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so my understanding of the orders, we would have to do that prior to discussion.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Do I have a second on the motion?
Point of order.
Please.
If you make a motion or second a motion, that does not compel you to vote for the motion or in favor of the motion. So if you want to proceed with discussing, you could just second for the heck of it.
Okay.
I will second. I will second to move forward.
Okay, motion is seconded. Is it appropriate to vote on the motion now then, or continue the discussion?
Discussion is, you have to call for discussion next.
Okay, thank you. All right, call for discussion. Thank you.
And Chair, I can share my screen. It may not be the best, might not come through the best, but I will just refer commissioners to the order that's in the packet tonight. It's on, it is, let's see, let me make sure I get the reference correct. It's included in the packet tonight as attachment 2. It's on page 16. That's the PDF page, or it's just a one-page order. I'll put up a screenshot here of the top, if people can see that. So this is the first part of the order. So this is the order that we are asking for. And a copy of this order has been in every packet that has been in front of the commission since the public hearing. I'll scroll down here. There was a minor modification here shown in track changes, just recognizing that the written record was left open from the initial public hearing until the date of January 18th. So really, and Christina, I don't know if you want to talk more specifically about the order, but basically it's support for the draft code sections and the findings that are included.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Okay, Christina, did you have any comment?
No, I'm just standing by for questions in case I can help answer any.
Thank you. I'll confess, I can't see hands because I'm not seeing the people. Commissioner Gill.
Thank you, Chair Linden. So I am in support of this motion with the caveat. So I might be asking for a straw poll that the other commissioners are feeling positive about that supplemental. For me, that's critical in moving forward with this approval. This meets the requirements, but I just really think that it's important that the council gets that other conversation. It's not a commitment to vote for the exact words or anything, but I would like a sense that that is something that the commissioners are willing to put forward.
Okay, refresh on the changes that you were concerned about, please.
So it's not changes, it's the supplemental order that is there's a supplemental that was provided by staff that has sort of captured the things that we've been talking about wanting the council to consider, which is related to the risk of demolition and encouraging retaining properties. It included some of the green space conversation and one more thing that I had in my head earlier and not, so I can look it up, but that's the supplemental section where we're asking them to like dig a little bit deeper on those topics as they deliberate and then future, even if they approve this. Thank you so much for putting that up.
That is helpful. Thank you.
All right, it took me a minute. We are prepared with slides tonight to discuss some of these additional if there's a preference by the commission to do so after. So
okay. I think right now, can we switch back to the people? We had some folks with some discussion. And I'll confess, I don't remember who was first. Commissioner Buck?
I think Commissioner Bergen was first.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. Just quick question on this. I am admittedly very, very, very familiar with Robert's rules, but I wanted to make sure with this being in addition to the recommendation we're putting forward, would we need to amend the motion to include the recommendation so that it read completely clear that it wasn't just the recommendation that we're moving forward, but also including this, the second piece that would be sort of like an addendum, if you will.
So I can jump in and answer that question if that works, Chair.
Please.
So the way that I have just outlined the script would be to just do them in two separate motions. One, to forward a recommendation on the code updates, and then next to have the commission discuss their recommendations on the supplemental recommendation and then move separately to forward that to council. But that it's not procedurally required that they be voted upon separately. If the commission wants to consider them both together and make one motion that's adopted at the same time, then that would be permissible. And in that case, you would amend the motion to include both of those in the motion. But you would likely want to, so you would need to amend the motion on the table, the primary motion that's pending, in order to add the supplemental recommendation. And I can provide you text for that. It's in attachment 3. So, and then if there were any changes to the text that was in there, then the commission ought to discuss any changes or additions to text that's in that supplemental recommendation. That was staff's sort of first attempt to capture what we thought we heard from the commission, understanding that you may want to make adjustments since it's your supplemental recommendation, should you decide to do that.
Okay.
So procedurally, options are open and it's what the commission wishes to do.
I might suggest I'll go ahead and call on Commissioner Buck, and then if you have a way to perhaps toss those up, is there a way to just easily display those on screen after Commissioner Buck? Okay, let's go that way because that way it's just there. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. You know, I'm with Commissioner Gill in that I feel strongly that providing a supplemental to council is an attractive option. I'm not sure that I'm ready to say that those 5 are the only things we would want to include in that supplemental. For the sake of procedure, I would lean towards sticking with the motion, voting on that, and then tackling a supplemental. I do agree with Commissioner Gill that it's important. We need to create the supplemental. I think trying to jam it all into one, I know that procedurally we could do that. I think that's going to bog us down a little bit. And I think that being able to take a second and review this process, move this process forward, but then review and say, what are the things that really stand out that's important to us that we want to really bring to council's attention so that they're aware and they can consider that as this comes before them. And I, having heard so much of this, it's just strikes me as maybe there's more than 5 that we would want to include if we were to deliberate on that process. So I think 5 is a great start, and maybe we'll end up there. But I would support us moving forward this motion, taking care of that, and then circling back with an amendment with the supplemental saying, in addition, these are the things that really stood out as important considerations.
Okay, Christina, is there any problem with doing that?
No problem with that.
Okay, all right, good, perfect. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Commissioner Buck and just wanted to indicate to Commissioner Gill my support for the supplemental recommendation. I do think that it's important to have separate discussion on the supplemental recommendation to perhaps supplement it even more. And then I also think that there could be the possibility of discussing, do we want a representative to go to City Council and share more information and speak on behalf of the Planning Commission in order to expand upon the supplement the supplemental recommendation. So I would like that to, I think, or I would prefer to have that happen outside of this specific code recommendation.
Okay, I see. Let's go to Commissioner Koivula first and then Commissioner Gill.
Yes, I agree with keeping the initial recommendation separate, and then also with having a more robust discussion of the second item with the incentivization. In regard to the initial motion, I did include a series of documents that, thank you, Mark, for including those in the package. And I know that we've read a lot of material regarding the code update, and I hesitated adding more information, but I felt it was an easier way for me to get across my full thoughts about the code update without taking up a tremendous amount of everyone's time. So I hope people have had a chance to take a look at those, and I'm ready to move forward with the motion, the initial motion. And then I would also recommend that we delay and think about the second motion for the incentivization and bring that forward at another date. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take those up separately. Commissioner Gill, and thank you, by the way. Commissioner Gill.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, I agree with keeping this separate. That was not my intention. I just wanted to affirm that people agreed that there would be a supplemental. I just wanted to know that that was going to be out there for me to consider my vote. I'm in support of this.
Okay. Christina, I think you were going to place the text on the screen. Is that correct?
At this point, Chair,
Call for a
the
motion.
motion stands, and the additional text we were going to put up was in regard to the supplemental recommendation, which we could do
Which would be
after
second.
the vote. So
Okay, move to order to adopt the order recommending approval of the developments, I'll get that out, code updates that is in the agenda packet as attachment 2 for this item. And there are changes, but those will be considered separately. The motion
Point of
is,
clarification, the motion included the changes to 3.2.245 and 3.2.255 as provided in attachment 1, option 1.2. And that's in the chat.
okay, thank you.
So, yeah, Chair, the motion's been made and seconded. I think at this point you could just call for the roll call.
Okay, call for the vote,
So Chair Landon,
please.
do you vote for or against the motion?
4.
Commissioner Quavala,
No.
Commissioner Gill,
Aye.
Commissioner Bergen,
Aye.
Commissioner McGinley,
Aye.
and Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Christine, I believe that what you have in the window is the second motion, is that correct?
No, Chair, you need to state the results of the vote.
Okay,
procedurally.
I'm sorry, the result of the vote was ayes. There were 5, thank you. Nays 1. The motion carries.
So, and I'll just, the motion that was in the chat was that first motion that just passed. And so we can jump in now to, I'm happy to share. It's included in the packet tonight as Christina mentioned it a moment ago. Attachment 3 is a draft or a start to a supplemental recommendation. And I'm happy to put that up on the screen and or put back up the slide that I had up a moment ago that kind of highlights some of the topics. So this is what would be the supplemental recommendation. So there could be, we could just start to discuss some of this tonight and or continue a much more robust discussion about additional topics related to this at future meetings. So we're prepared. So there's 4 bullets considered in this draft tonight. Again, this is your recommendation. It's completely, we can modify this in real time or on the fly, anticipating that the discussion may go on beyond tonight. We're happy to revise this and bring it back in draft form to a future meeting. And again, I'll just stop here and I'll reshare again the slide that had included a 5th bullet a moment ago, that what at least we've tried to track and capture some of the points. And again, there will likely be additional ones for consideration. So it's at the Planning Commission's, from my perspective, your discretion tonight, whether you would like to start on some of this discussion tonight or just stop and bring this up at a future meeting, or it's up to you. So
Open to input. Commissioner Gill.
So what's the timeline for council, for this going to council? Just I would like them to see the supplemental when they see this, so that would help me inform me of our how quickly I'm gonna move this forward. Like, I want to be thoughtful, but I also want them to get it in a meaningful time frame.
That's a great question. I'm looking for the slide now of the detailed timeline. And there's significantly more lead time necessary due to having to take it to the Board of County Commissioners. I'm going to just share this slide. I think this is
Mark,
yeah.
can I throw one thing out there, Commissioner Gill?
Sure.
Please.
You know, it also occurs to me that this is something I can pass on to Counselor Pitts, letting them know that, you know, we're moving this forward, but this is a pretty important piece to us. And so to please be aware that that supplemental is coming along. So in addition to, I mean, that's not to say that it should change where you're going with that. I like your question, but just throwing that out there. I already have a note to do that.
So I've shared this more detailed timeline. Basically what we're envisioning is, again, so we still have to now go back to the Lane County Planning Commission. We anticipate to do that on, let me see the date. I think it is, forgive me here. March 15th is the date. So in, what is that, 1, 2, 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks. So we plan to go back to the Lane County Planning Commission. That doesn't necessarily at this point have to be a joint meeting with this body. You have made your motion past that recommendation. We will take that exact same, well, essentially that same recommendation for them to recommend that to the Board of County Commissioners. Hope to get that recommendation from them on March 15th. And then we would proceed with going through the steps necessary to get it to an ultimate joint City Council Board of County Commissioners public hearing, anticipating an April 25th date, where I would see, and Christina may want to chime in if I get something wrong here, but where I could see presenting the supplemental recommendation to just even the City Council, it wouldn't, that supplemental recommendation would not have to be necessarily considered at the joint public hearing, but we could present it to just our City Council at their May 23rd. And again, these are all tentative dates, just kind of anticipating it could, whether they need all these meetings in here or not. But this is kind of, I think, gives you some general time frame of what we're thinking. But I would think we could take that supplemental recommendation to our City Council in this May timeframe. So that would give the Planning Commission, you know, a good month and a half even or more to continue this conversation and get your supplemental recommendation as robust as you desire to forward to them. Does that help answer that question?
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
I'm assuming, Mark, you would warn them that that's coming, because otherwise they're going to wonder, where is this coming from?
Yeah, we would definitely include that as part of, let's see. So I checked in with them on January 3rd. My next regular check-in with them is April 4th. That actually doesn't show up on this time schedule, but I plan to do my next regular check-in with them potentially right at the beginning of April. So even at that April, early April regular quarterly check-in with the City Council, I could inform them that the Planning Commission has made the recommendation to move that forward, that we're scheduling the joint hearing, and that it includes a supplemental recommendation that will be forthcoming.
Okay, other comment, question? Sandy?
Yeah, I would just like to say that there is more time, but you do have other meeting agenda items coming. You have the Main Street safety. There are a few different citizen engagement plans coming your way in your role as the Committee for Citizen Involvement. And we may get future applications that need to come to the commission. So there is some time, but there's not lots of open time. So I'm just making you aware of that. In addition, the City Council is going to be discussing housing more generally in work sessions coming up, both as part of the Community Development Advisory Committee work that comes their way, but also because of the legislation. And so we have slated an April 18th work session with them to talk about increasing the affordability of middle housing, and then a longer work session to talk more generally about the housing strategy on May 9th. So those are some dates at which the council will already be discussing housing issues. And so your recommendations could become part of those conversations.
All right, so we have more discussions coming up on the supplemental recommendations, and we can worry about that later. Is that correct? Sandy?
I think I'll just chime in, Chair, that part of it is that you could start to discuss the supplemental recommendation tonight. It is 7:30, 7:40 almost. You know, you do have time tonight if you'd like. It's up, again, totally up to you, but.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gill.
So I'd like to discuss a little bit more tonight, and then maybe we can, if we have some more solid wordsmithing or even suggestions like Commissioner McGinley talked about, actually presenting it to City Council in some way, maybe we can share additional comments with staff and then revisit it if we can squeeze it in the next meeting, if that's appropriate. I feel like it's valuable to get this in front of the City Council sooner than later, especially because they're having those discussions, and if they can hear the support of the value of those, I think that that's meaningful. So that's how I suggest we approach it.
Okay, thoughts? I mean, otherwise, that sounds fine with me. I think we have the basis. Sandy, I think you have the basis of where we're beginning. Is that presentable, or?
Yeah, I can present the slide at least that had the 5 bullets on it that you saw earlier.
And then we'll open it up for discussion. Yes.
Is that showing there again? That's the slide I shared earlier.
Okay.
And again, these are the first 4 bullets of these are the 4 that are included in that, or the draft supplemental recommendation. That's attachment 3 in your packet. We added this 5th bullet as identified just another potential topic that was raised previously that could be considered. But again, we're happy to expand on this list or modify this list. We'll capture the conversation wherever it goes in terms of what the Planning Commission wants in the supplemental recommendation.
Okay. Okay. Discussion.
Oh, you're seeing my wrong screen now. I'm sorry. I just
Yeah,
realized.
I'm seeing that screen, so I can't see hands.
Yeah, hang on. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. I would like us in the supplemental recommendation to specify that subsidized housing, or that affordable housing is either subsidized and or income qualified housing. So just really specifying what that incentive would be for. I don't think it's necessary at this point to specify the, the specific percent of area median income that we want, but I think just the word affordable can be a little subjective. So specifying that it's capital A, capital H, affordable subsidized housing or income qualified housing.
Good point. Other. Commissioner Gill.
Apologies, I'm talking a lot tonight. I really am compelled, especially after the conversation with this body regarding the home ownership opportunities, and maybe there's even more, perhaps even funding or bigger incentives that the city could consider in supporting that. So I'm not sure what that language is right now or what that looks like. That's one that I would love for people who have that language, like perhaps Commissioner Bergen and Commissioner McGinley, who have talked about it a bit. But that's one that maybe I would like to beef up a little bit more. I think it's great that it's on there, and that might be enough, but I'd like to maybe even toss in some suggested things to consider on that one in particular.
I would certainly welcome input, and I've got fingers and I can type.
Well, I guess in the interim, between this meeting and the next one, perhaps, because I don't have that at my fingertips.
Okay, give it some thought then. Okay. Other comment or questions? Okay, so I think we're not at this. Commissioner Gill, did you still have a comment or question? Okay. I don't think we're ready to, move to adopt supplemental recommendation. I think that's going to be at a later meeting. So I think that covers our regular agenda for now, and unless I'm cutting somebody off, I don't want to do that.
I'll take the direction to find a time on one of your future agendas to bring this conversation back, working with Sandy on those. And I don't know if I haven't heard specifically, we can look at some additional language for the affordable housing, being specific about that it's either subsidized or income qualified. I think we have some pretty good general language about a certain percentage of AMI and some things around that. So we could provide some suggested language for your consideration around some of those things. In terms of the home ownership opportunities, I can work with Sandy a little bit more on any ideas we may have around that to bring back. But other than that, that sounds fine.
Okay, appreciate that. Sandy?
Yeah, so my question to the commission is that your next meeting, which is on March 1st, there will be time in your, there will be some time where you could continue discussing this, because your only regular session agenda item is the Catholic Community Services rezone, and that's just a deliberation. There's no public hearing because that's carried over. But I don't know that staff is going to have a lot more other than maybe the language about the subsidized income qualified housing. I don't know that we're going to have time to really delve into home ownership. So do you want to put that on the agenda for further discussion? Do you yourselves have things that you want to add or discuss that evening, or wait until staff has more to bring back to you for a future meeting?
Input? Commissioner McGinley?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Commissioner Gill. How much extra information are you looking for in the supplemental recommendation regarding homeownership opportunities?
I'm sort of looking at, I am looking at this supplemental opportunity to kind of go beyond just code conversation. And so the idea of other incentives or programs, like encouraging looking at the bigger picture for home ownership opportunities. So not just sort of couched in the code language. Does that make sense? So that I don't know. I feel like we don't very often get to go outside the code. And it's an opportunity to say, look, we've heard all these things and we've had this really deep conversation, and maybe there's a bigger step that City Council or the city could take. And we really want you to think broadly about these things. So, I'm open to options, but more it was about sort of broadening that language a little bit. I don't think that we have to have specific examples, but if there are some, that we see out in the world that other cities are doing for this, or other nonprofits are assisting with this kind of thing, just to throw a little bit of that in there to expand the thinking about it was all I was going for.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's just making me think, and I don't want to put Sandy on the spot, but I'm wondering, I don't track the housing work that's the city already does. And I know the city council has recently contemplated how to spend money around certain projects and things, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to share just information on work the city already does around housing, or anything around that might help just clarify things that we already are doing. Or I don't know if the Planning Commission's been provided information on that in the past as well.
Is it possible, I mean, I don't know if city staff has the time for it, but to check with some, similarly sized other communities and see what they're doing? This has got to be a statewide problem.
Right. I mean, I think we are not going to have time currently to really undertake a look at all the options. That's really what we would do in the future when we do a housing needs analysis or a housing production strategy. We're not going to do that now. So I think that what your recommendation to council is that these issues are important to you and you want them to think about things. And within that context, if there are particular things you want to focus on, that's fine. But don't look to staff to do a lot more work in this area, is I guess what I'm trying to say, because we don't have the capacity to do that. I'll say that we are starting Friday, we are starting to recruit for a housing analyst, because we know that that type of work is needed, and we need to have someone who can really focus on more in this housing area, but we don't have that capacity currently. So this is a plug to, if you know people that could be good additions to our staff, encourage them to apply. It will probably be open for about 3 weeks. And we can certainly give them some things to work on once they get here, with your recommendation to council, if council agrees with you. But we don't have a lot of time to really delve into all the options at this time. I'm not trying to get out of this, but I think, there is some background we can provide. And I can direct the commission to some of the council discussions, and you could go back and look at packets or meeting notes from those meetings. There are some upcoming discussions. And so to the extent that I can try to bridge the gap between the Planning Commission and council in helping you know what each other are talking about and help feed each other, I'll think about how we can potentially do that. And I'm thinking out loud, but would there be a reason to bring the governance team together as a way to maybe discuss some of that, since I think scheduling a joint meeting is not really practical at this point, but maybe there's a governance committee that could talk about that. I don't know if there's interest for that, but I'm brainstorming and I see lots of hands. So I'll stop and turn it over to somebody else.
Indeed. Commissioner Gill.
Yeah, to clarify, I am not asking for specific examples. All I was saying is add some bullet points of things beyond code that could be considered to help that situation. I can help. I'll look up some stuff and send it to you. I'm not looking for specific things, but there could be loan programs, there could be grant programs, there could be working with nonprofit, like there could be a bunch of things. And if Council's already talking about that, that's great. But I think the message from Planning Commission that that's important is important for them to hear, and it supports their work. So I'm totally not asking you to do more research or do a presentation. Just like, you know, from doing this work, different ways that these things can happen. I just want broader language for them, asking them to think beyond the code in solutions for that. So it can be a sentence or a few bullet points. It doesn't have to be a bunch of examples of this kind. Like, that's the work that then they should ask staff to do if they think it's important to approach that, right? That's what, so that's what I was getting at. I was not asking for a bunch of additional work or presentations. And I'm happy to try to come up with some of that language between now and the next meeting if that's helpful for staff, but sometimes that's not helpful. So let me know.
Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. Along that same line of thinking, my comment about income qualified housing, I think could just be a word replacement for the word affordable that's currently in the slide with the supplemental recommendation text. And then I was thinking for the homeownership recommendation, again, there could be a bullet point that says such as, but not limited to, you know, system development charge waivers or discounts if you're using a middle housing land, or if you're going to do a middle housing land division, down payment assistance, reduced fees for middle housing land divisions in the first few years, pre-approved plans that are sourced from local architects, things like that, you know, just where we plant the seeds, but we're not limiting the scope, and we allow City Council to make that direction themselves and put it on the staff's work plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. You know, I think to me, one of the important pieces of this is to recognize some things in this process. Staff has done a tremendous amount of work. It's really incredible what has been done. And I think what's also true, and you know, I feel like I've heard Mark say this in a number of times in various ways. A lot of what we're doing with this code is the best that we can do given what we've been given by the state. Like, there's a lot here that if it was just up to us, if it was just up to Mark and the state said, just, you know, come up with the best you can do, this recommendation would look different. I think we all know that. There's imperfections with it. And I think the real spirit of the importance of the supplemental is to recognize not only that there are those imperfections, but also bring attention to what some of those areas are, and really just highlight that. And not so much that we get really specific in terms of, you know, how to fix those, but just really highlighting the issues, saying, hey, you know, this is our recommendation based on the best that we had available to us. But that having been said, it raises lots of concerns, it raises lots of issues. There's more work to be done. And these are the areas that we're highlighting that need to be considered, not only with this process, but going forward. And I think maybe not too macro, but we want to, I want to really focus on highlighting what directions need to be explored, and maybe not get too specific, because I don't know that this supplemental is going to solve specific issues, but it's going to highlight them and hopefully get them to the right processes. And so that's my sentiment out of this. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to require more from staff on this, but I also think you guys, staff, has recognized these things too. And as we've been going through here, I mean, there's a lot of great work, but I've heard time and time again where Mark said, you know, this is an area where this is what we have to work with. And I think given that, this is the best route to go. And so to me, that's really the spirit of what the supplemental is. But that having said, I don't in principle disagree with anything Commissioner McGinley said or Commissioner Gill said. I would hate for us to get too into the details and the minutia and lose the macro point of, hey, we gotta address these, whether it be now or in another way. Thank you.
Cuevila.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that we should just go ahead and table the discussion this evening and brainstorm additional bullet points. That's what we're really looking for, is we're looking for general items of interest we'd like to express to the council that we'd like to see happen. I don't think we need to get into deep specifics, because if the council looks at them and likes some of the ideas, then they will seek out information through staff, etc. So let's just go ahead and assemble our bullet points, get them back next week, and proceed from there. Thanks.
Thank you. Sandy, is that okay?
So are you also, yeah, that's fine. What I'm understanding Commissioner Cuevila to say is that you do want to talk about this at your meeting next week. So is the rest of the commission agreeable to doing that?
I'll ask this. Any objections? Seeing none, the commission is agreeable. Commissioner Gill, do you have an objection?
No, but do you want to give us a deadline to submit our stuff for you so that it can be compiled? Like, is that a couple of days then, or? And you're still muted.
You're still muted. Yeah, nothing came through.
Sorry. I mean, we've loaded the 2 agenda items for your meeting onto Springfield, Oregon Speaks. I haven't put the agenda together yet. You know, normally we would have, tomorrow we would post the agenda. So I can put it on there, but I would say at this point, if commissioners have ideas, just send them to Mark and then he can just present them at the meeting.
Yeah, I would just chime in to say we're not going to have time. I mean, we're already past the deadline of time that we'd normally be required to submit a packet of materials. So we're not going to have the traditional packet that we would. I see Christina pop up. I don't know procedurally she has concerns, but.
Just a reminder, when you email those to Mark, please do not CC your fellow planning commissioners. Just send them directly to Mark. We don't want to inadvertently create a serial meeting. I know you all know that, but I also know I have to say it so that it remains at the top of your brains.
Valid point.
And so, yeah, I'm happy to receive those emails. I would say if you could get them, you know, give you the weekend and no later than Monday. I can compile them Monday, I guess. And I better look at my calendar for Monday. I don't know what's got I'm committing to, but yeah, I can have time Monday to kind of compile those and be ready to present them on Tuesday evening. Is that what we're talking about? Tuesday, March 1st, right? Is the next meeting? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. Mark, there was a slide that you shared of what we're talking about, and I wasn't able to find that in the packet. I found it in a different format, but the format that you had shared on the screen that had the green on it was a lot easier to read. Can you send that over so that we can see the bullet points a lot clearer on what it is we're looking after?
Sure. Yes, I'm happy to send those.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. All right, I believe that well, we're getting there. Do we have any commissioners with a report on a city council meeting? Hearing none, do we have any other business from members of the Planning Commission? Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. If you want to go to another night meeting this week, there is a free training opportunity being put on by the City of Eugene, the Incremental Development Alliance, and Better Housing Together tomorrow night. It's virtual. It's called Cultivating Place, Introducing the Incremental Development Movement. And it's an event that is going to kind of act as an introduction for folks who want to do development in their own backyard. So there was some action from Eugene City Council. They really want to help, these smaller property owners develop property, develop their property in addition to, the big developers. So I think that's a really interesting perspective to learn about. I can say the link and then put it in the chat, but also follow up via email with it. It's www.incrementaldevelopment.org/events/Eugene lecture. And again, it's free, but I think that might even put some ideas into our head for what the supplemental recommendation could include. So hope you all attend.
Sounds interesting. Thank you. Commissioner Gill.
I guess I didn't say it at the discussion or the vote, but I just want to say, that was a little anticlimactic. This has been a lot of work from staff and from the commission and from the public for their participation. I just want to make note of that. So awesome. A huge lift. I hope that, I know it's not done, but this is a big step. So congratulations. Well done, Mark. Well done, Sandy, everyone else who has helped, Arva and everybody. It's a big deal. This is a really big deal. So I just wanted to say that. And also, despite of how much more work it gave us, I think that the middle housing requirements from the state helped us have really important conversations that needed to happen. And I appreciated everybody's participation and thoughts in it, opened my eyes to a lot of things. So yeah, thanks everybody, and well done, staff and everybody.
I'm frankly grateful to those people who have expertise in real estate, because that is not my world. Any business from the Development and Public Works Department?
Sure. In the interest of sharing information, I'm gonna take you all to Springfield, Oregon Speaks. And just as a reminder, if you go down here to the 4 planning commissioners and click there, you will see the schedule for council meeting attendance. And I know some of you have forgotten where that is or may not have it on your radar, but this is on the schedule as laid out. And if there are events like the one coming up on Thursday that you want us to add on here, we can add those if we have enough time, beforehand, that we can update this so that you are aware of other activities that are going on. And I've already told you about our recruitment for the the housing analyst. And so I think that's it for this meeting.
Sandy, thank you. I have never noticed that link before, so thank you. I think that completes business from the Development of Public Works. I therefore adjourn this session of the Springfield Planning Commission meeting. Thank you, everybody.
And they're recording.